This is CBC Vancouver News.
Canada is playing amazing.
This is almost beyond a dream. I never even dreamed of Canada at the World Cup.
So close. After 36 years, British Columbians take in Canada's World Cup match with Belgium. Also,
it's like a dark cloud.
Banned for life. A BC man warns about cannabis laws after his mistake crossing the U.S. border. And the province's plans to ramp up funding for policing in BC, where the money will go and what the critics say. Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Baneet Braich. Dan is away tonight. Breaking news in Coquitlam. Police say 2 people have been shot and killed. Police say they were called to Dawes Hill Road and Mundy Street around 7:45 p.m. Officers say they found multiple shell casings and 2 unresponsive victims, both inside a vehicle suffering from gunshot wounds. One victim was pronounced dead at the scene. The other rushed to hospital and died from their injuries. Police say a 3rd victim was also found with a non-life-threatening gunshot wound. They have also been sent to the hospital. The Integrated Homicide Investigation Team has been called, and this comes the day after an armed robbery at a car dealership in Coquitlam, but there's nothing to indicate if the incidents are connected. We'll have more on that in a bit. Police are asking anyone with dashcam footage or information to contact IHIT, and we'll keep you updated as the situation unfolds. Now, staying in Coquitlam, a manhunt is on after an armed robbery at a car dealership in Coquitlam yesterday afternoon. As we showed you last night, it led to gunfire in the middle of rush hour. As Yasmin Gandam reports, numerous people were hurt.
The robbery led to exchanges of gunfire, a vehicle chase, carjacking, and several road closures. RCMP says to protect those involved, they won't say how many people were hurt.
Multiple victims were injured at the car dealership as a result of the armed robbery. Luckily, none of these victims suffered any gunshot wounds or serious life-threatening injuries.
The car dealership Journey Approved tells CBC News that armed suspects physically battered staff and robbed them of their personal belongings. One employee was taken to hospital. After the suspects fled in a stolen vehicle, they crashed on Highway 1 near the King Edward overpass. One of them was arrested there. Police say another suspect carjacked a nearby vehicle and was later caught in Surrey. Both suspects are known to police.
We're in negotiation or communication with Crown Counsel as to what charges will be laid. Those charges will be coming in the near future.
Coquitlam RCMP are still looking for 2 other suspects. Now, they will be providing a more detailed description to the public of what these suspects look like at a later date. But all they did tell us is both suspects were fully clothed and wearing masks to conceal their identity. Now, RCMP are asking for the public's help at this time, urging anyone with cell phone or dash cam footage to contact them. Yasmin Gandam, CBC News, Coquitlam.
The BC government is cashing in millions of dollars to boost policing in the province. The Premier says $230 million will be spent to hire 277 RCMP officers across BC. And the focus is to hire more staff in rural, remote, and Indigenous communities. Funding will also support officers dealing with violent, high-risk offenders. The funding is part of the government's Safer Communities Action Plan, but the opposition says the plan has come too late.
The reality is that a lot of this money will just go to unfreeze positions that had to be frozen to make up for budgetary shortfalls and really just to be able to put gas in the cars. So while we will hopefully see more officers filling those unfrozen positions, this is something that is long overdue.
Now, the Premier says the change will help tackle public safety issues head on, and the money will be spent over the next 3 years. Well, it was a soccer game, 36 years in the making. Canada's men's team took on Belgium in their return to the World Cup. Karen Larson has more on the excitement and the close finish.
At Gastown's Lamplighter Pub, a house divided. Half the fans at the Canadian Men's World Cup coming out party cheering for the home side, the other half supporting world number 2, Belgium.
I'm conflicted by heart, but home is Vancouver, home is still Belgium. It's not the land of the soccer, it's the land of the hockey.
Still, the emotion of Canada's return to the beautiful game's biggest stage could not be denied.
This is almost beyond a dream. I never even dreamed of Canada at the World Cup.
Very excited to see them. I remember them back in '86 when I was just a young child.
Canada played an attacking first half, generating chances, and what could have been the Canadian men's first ever World Cup goal when Alphonso Davies stepped up to take a penalty kick that was stopped. A goal for Belgium in the 44th minute made it 1-0 at halftime. Canada down, but not out, according to the faithful.
I feel good. I mean, Canada is playing amazing. I think they're going to come back at it. I don't think it's just going to end at 1-0. I think they have a huge chance to win this game.
I think that if you're Belgium, you know you've been lucky. And that makes me very proud.
So far, it's been very encouraging, very exciting. Yes, I wasn't really expecting the Canadian team to be coming out so strong.
The Canadians did everything right, except score. And when the clock ran out, it was these fans breathing a sigh of relief.
Oh my God. Oh my God. This should have been like a relatively easy walkover kind of game, but Canada played really, really well. I mean, we got out of it okay, but they played really well.
Team Canada now has a few days to regroup before another tough test, Sunday versus 2018 World Cup finalist Croatia. Karen Larson, CBC News, Vancouver.
And the excitement, the build-up, as you saw, fans crowded together to watch the Canadian team. Plenty also gathered in Kelowna. Fans met at the Welton Arms pub to have a few pints while watching the game. The province has temporarily extended bar operating hours to make up for the time change with Qatar. A BC man has now been banned from entering the U.S. for life after a mistake, a forgotten CBD bottle. As Joel Ballard reports, it's strong advice about cannabis laws as people start traveling more.
Jonathan Howling crosses the border dozens of times every year for work, but on his latest trip, his car was randomly searched. Agents found a forgotten bottle of CBD oil in the console. Now, he can never go back to the United States.
It's just embarrassing to tell folks that, sorry, I can't come to your country because of a lifetime ban. It's like a dark cloud.
Howling's event company produces Christmas festivals around North America. He was traveling to the States for contracts in Chicago and New York. All that's at risk.
I simply can't see a way to make it work in the future if I can't be there in person. It will have to fold.
CBD is a non-psychoactive chemical found in marijuana, and it's not a controlled substance in the U.S. as long as it contains less than 0.3% THC. Howling claims the border agents told him his bottle tested positive, although he was never shown proof despite repeated requests. And Howling's case isn't unique.
A week does not go by where I don't hear from one or two people, always Canadian.
Despite cannabis being legal in both Canada and Washington state, the borders are regulated federally, and federal law prohibits the possession of marijuana. In a statement, the Border Service says, U.S. Customs and Border Protection enforces the laws of the United States, and U.S. laws will not change following Canada's legalization of marijuana.
These officers are judge, jury, and hangman. Your trunk of your car is full with, hundreds of pounds of marijuana, or there's a minute amount in your car or in your cosmetic bag.
Howling knows he made a mistake, but wishes agents could use discretion. Saunders says that's not the case.
Is America safer now that I'm not permitted there for the rest of my life? I don't think it is.
Now Howling is scrambling, trying to figure out how to keep his dream business alive. But ultimately, he can't help but feel that in cases like his, the enforcement of the Controlled Substances Act at the border is failing to achieve its intended purpose.
Business has been fabulous.
And Saunders agrees, adding that those benefiting most are lawyers. Joel Ballard, CBC News, Langley.
The Coquitlam Highway is now open after it was closed following an incident RCMP referred to as active and unfolding earlier today. At around 2:30 p.m., the highway was closed in both directions between Hope and Merritt. However, later in the evening, Mounties said that the incident had ended, and they will not be releasing any further information about what happened. After a deadly stabbing in a Surrey school parking lot on Tuesday, Mounties have now identified the 18-year-old victim. Police say Meteorologist Johanna was stabbed outside Tamanawa Secondary School in Surrey's Newton neighborhood. He was rushed to hospital but died from his injuries. The school's principal says Sethi was not a member of the school community, and grade 11 student Samir Jain was in class when the school went into lockdown.
Suddenly, we get this instruction to shut our classes, shut our windows, and to restrict our movement, right? And, while everything was shrouded in uncertainty at that moment, it was something that was deeply troubling to each one of us, deeply scary and fearful, right?
Mounties have not released more information on the victim, but say he and his attacker knew each other. Witnesses have identified a 17-year-old suspect who has been arrested. Police say the stabbing is not believed to be associated with the Lower Mainland gang conflict. Anyone with information is asked to call the Integrated Homicide Investigation Team. A Surrey Mountie accused of allegedly using his position to meet women is facing additional charges. RCMP announced today Peter Leckie is now facing 5 new charges. This past summer, investigators alleged that Leckie used his status as an officer to have sex with women on and off duty. This summer, he was charged with 7 breach of trust charges and 2 counts of obtaining computer service by fraud in relation to those allegations. Mounties say he now faces 3 additional charges of breach of trust, 1 charge of obtaining computer services by fraud, and 1 count of sexual assault related to alleged misconduct over a period of 7 years. Leckie is scheduled to appear in court on the new charges on December 14th. A man found guilty of killing his daughters on Christmas Day 5 years ago on Vancouver Island has been denied an appeal by the province's highest court. Andrew Barry was convicted of second degree in 2019 and sentenced to life in prison for the deaths of 4-year-old Aubrey and 6-year-old Chloe Barry. They were found stabbed to death in their beds in Oak Bay. Andrew Barry claimed the lower court made errors, saying the judge allowed the jury to hear evidence of incriminating statements Barry made to first responders and his sister. But the BC Court of Appeal has dismissed his claim, saying the trial judge didn't make any mistakes that would prompt them to change the verdict.
How you manage it within a small strata, because we're definitely a small place. It's our home.
After a new measure was announced to lift rental restrictions to create more housing, we hear about the reaction at the new housing reforms proposed by the Premier. And thanks for staying with us on our commercial-free live stream. The rising cost of living means Canadians on Prince Edward Island are facing some tough decisions. Some are cutting back on spending. As Laura Meter reports, that has local businesses worried.
Consumers are cautious these days. They're more aware of what they're spending and trying to save money for essentials.
This year I'm really cutting back because I don't want to spend a lot of money in that. I have to replace my roof on my house. Like everybody's feeling the pinch.
Some are still paying for repairs from Tropical Storm Fiona. Others say the cost of food and heat means they have to budget.
I would say I'm probably more conscious about where I'm shopping and what I'm buying. I probably think twice. I'm not just like running out the door to grab something now.
I just enjoy going to a cafe or something like that, but it's getting expensive, so I'd rather go to a library.
Business groups are concerned that spending is down, and it comes at a time when owners are also dealing with increased costs.
The consensus is the spend in the community just isn't there right now because people are worried and they're being more conservative with their money. Luxury items, a higher price clothing, knickknacks for the home, things like that. Those businesses are struggling.
This consignment store says it's been a slow month. More people are bringing in items to sell, but spending less.
Unfortunately,
everyone's going through the same thing.
This bakery says bread sales are good, but people are holding back on desserts. This hair salon says people are still coming in for services, but aren't shopping afterwards.
Definitely, I think with inflation, we're seeing a difference in people spending on retail products for hair care and styling and things like that.
This restaurant and catering business is busy for now, but knows that could change.
For now, we haven't noticed too much of a difference with customers' spending habits, but I suspect that by January, February, that will change a bit.
Chamber of Commerce groups in PEI are encouraging people to shop local to keep as much money as possible in their communities. Laura Meter, CBC News, Charlottetown.
More reaction to tell you about now when it comes to the new housing reforms brought in by Premier David Eby, specifically on one measure made to lift rental restrictions in most strata buildings across BC. It's a move the province says will open up thousands of new homes to renters, but as Michelle Gassoub tells us, some worry it will carry other consequences.
Thank you very much for joining us this morning to talk about the important issue of housing.
David Eby wasting no time making moves on housing. Earlier this week announcing he'll lift restrictions on rentals in most strata-managed buildings in this province.
It makes no sense that people are searching for housing and people want to rent housing, but there's a strata rule that prevents that from happening.
Eby says the move will instantly put nearly 3,000 rental units on the market, but those who volunteer on stratas worry about what the change will mean for them.
The debate comes how you manage it within a small strata, because we're definitely a small place. It's our home.
Robert Ford sits on the strata for his home in Kitsilano. The building has 16 units, 15 owners, 1 unit dedicated for rentals. He says stratas in smaller buildings like this one, staffed entirely by volunteers, could soon find themselves overwhelmed.
We will get, as volunteers, the work that a resident owner might do. There's also a level of separation. So if a renter resident has an issue, who are they going to go to first? Technically, they're supposed to go to their landlord, but if their landlord's not in the building, it is a slower process to deal with things.
The change also raises concerns about investors bidding against families trying to become homeowners. Ryan King bought his place with his wife and sister 3 years ago after years of looking and being priced out by speculators. He says the rental restrictions on his townhouse made it possible for him to finally buy a place in Surrey.
It made it a lot more affordable, and it kept out people who are just looking to make a quick buck. Because there are no rentals available in our units. So everyone who owns a unit here lives in their home.
Eby says in a housing crisis, every unit on the rental market counts, and these owners say they'll welcome renters into their buildings.
If everybody's willing to be in the community and pitch in, when it snows, somebody grabs the shovel out of the room and shovels. It's not a huge process because we all want a nice, safe place to live.
One of several changes from the new premier, and one that, if approved, will come into effect immediately. Michelle Gassoub, CBC News, Vancouver.
Taxpayers now have an idea of how much Vancouver City Council plans to spend next year and on what. The draft budget forecasts almost $2 billion in spending in 2023 with a 5% property tax hike. But as Justin McElroy tells us, the funding for the largest part of the budget, police, could grow.
Vancouver's police department wants $38 million more next year, $383 million in total, and that's going to lead to some hard decisions. So why does the VPD want $38 million more? Well, some of it is things that they have to have under the draft budget. Collective agreements, wages go up, other levels of government download things to them. Some of it is the 100 new police officers that Mayor Ken Sim promised when he got elected last month. And then there's things that the VPD would just like to have. More body cameras, cell phones, more flexibility for overtime. But those 100 new police officers, that was a big promise in Sim's election platform, so that's already underway. But he also said that he wanted to keep property taxes low, and the budget discussion starts next week. So what happens next? Can they keep property tax increases under 5% while increasing the police budget by more than 10%? And if they do, does anything have to get cut from the rest of the budget? We'll see how that plays out over the next few weeks.
Recorded cases of avian flu in BC have jumped drastically since just yesterday. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency now says 13 commercial poultry farms in BC have recorded avian flu infections in their birds within the last week. Avian flu has been on the rise for the past year in Canada and the U.S., and that has some farmers very worried.
Its ability to spread and get into barns is devastating on poultry. The kill rate that it has amongst birds it's kind of unbelievable what it does. It's just completely devastating to any flocks that it gets into. And so as farmers, we're doing everything we can to keep it out of our barns.
Seaman says while he is concerned for his birds' safety, farmers in the Fraser Valley are working together to protect provincial food supply. TransLink hopes more businesses will subsidize a transit pass for their workers, and it's launching a plan to try and get more companies on board. The transit-friendly employer certification will allow employers who give employees a subsidy to get mentioned in recruiting campaigns and reports. TransLink is pitching it as a good way to attract and keep staff. They'll have to pay at least half of a worker's transit pass. Small businesses will need to sign up a quarter of their employees, while businesses with more than 200 workers will need to get 10% on board. TransLink says the transportation is the biggest source of emissions in Metro Vancouver, and about 1 in 5 work trips are on public transit. Road closures along Highway 1's Kicking Horse Canyon will be galloping into the sunset and ahead of schedule, too. That scenic section of highway had been closed for construction, including road widening, bridge reinforcement, and a series of new viaducts and walls along the steep rock. Come Friday, though, it will once again be open for business, but more construction is scheduled for the spring. The project will have eventually had 4 lanes of traffic to one of the most dangerous parts of the Trans-Canada. And here's a live shot of Cambie Street and City Hall. Johanna will have your full forecast next.
It certainly was an attention grabber. A huge inflatable chainsaw, a banner stretching across a major downtown street, flanked by protesters, backing up traffic for blocks.
What you're saying is the entire city of Vancouver has to suffer in its traffic problems as opposed to going through the courts and doing this properly? Is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying is that these people are willing to sit here. They're willing to risk arrest.
And they were arrested, 23 in all. It was the latest in a worldwide series of Greenpeace protests against logging in Clayoquot Sound, eliciting praise from an unlikely source, a spokesman for the demonstrators' target.
We can really appreciate a well-organized PR campaign, and that's what this is, and it blows my socks off. It's great stuff.
But appreciation aside, the forestry company admits it's worried it's losing the public relations battle. And today, Alexander gamely tried to refute the protesters' message.
We support sustainable forestry and will continue to do that around the world.
Great, and ultimately you will support what we're doing in Clayoquot Sound. Give it time, give it a chance, let's try to make it work.
But in this battle for public sympathy, another possible blow today for the supporters of logging. The provincial ombudsman released a report criticizing the provincial government for not properly consulting Native groups before allowing logging in Clayoquot Sound.
The government was wrong. Our recommendation is that if in any kind of situation like this in the future,
that the Nuu-chah-nulth or whatever First Nation must be meaningfully consulted.
The Provincial Minister of Aboriginal Affairs issued a news release today saying that his government is currently involved in land claims negotiations with the Native groups in the area. But the Ombudsman says that's not the point, that consultations should have begun months ago. Ian Hannah-Mansing, CBC News, Vancouver.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
CBC British Columbia's annual Food Bank Day returns on December 2nd. Join us for special broadcasts of your favorite CBC Radio 1 programs and fundraising for BC's food banks. And enjoy candlelit carols and joyous holiday favorites at Christmas with Corleone, December 16th to 19th. Celebrate the season and get your tickets at corleone.org.
The weather update is brought to you by Direct Buy Furnace, installing the most reliable heating and cooling brand. It's hard to stop a train.
And it's time for your BC-wide weather forecast. CBC's meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe joins us. Joe, I felt a dash of rain today.
Yes.
And I hear temperatures are hitting double digits.
It's true, Baneet. We have everything but the kitchen sink, basically, in the long-range forecast. Showers today on the back end of that system that continue to bring the snow to the interior overnight. And now we're going to see that big warm up as we get ready for the next weather maker, already pushing into central and northern coastal sections. And check this out. I don't know if you can make out the lightning through the evening, but that's how intense this next storm system is. We have wind warnings in yellow, Haida-Gwaii, all the way down to the north coast of Vancouver. I'm looking to see wind gusts approach 110 kilometers per hour over the next 24 hours, coming in from the southeast. And inland Terrace, Stewart, Kitimat, over 50 to 70 millimeters of rain. For Metro Vancouver, we just have some of that lingering drizzle that was felt today in the next few hours, clearing out overnight, and that's why our temperatures will drop to a 3 and then back up to a 10 in the sunshine. So feeling quite lovely if you can get out and stick your face in the sun before this system slides south. It's also bringing some good snow up towards Dease Lake. We basically have two big systems coming through in the next few days, and the timing is tricky. Stopping you Friday morning, that's when we'll sort of get the next one in through the south coast, and then you can see the next weather maker once again starting on the north coast and working its way down for Saturday into Metro Vancouver. Behind this one, it is going to drag down much cooler air, and I'll show you that in the long range in just a moment. But getting you through to Monday as far as rainfall or precip totals anyway, you can see that big bullseye of the white. That's over 100 millimeters. Metro Vancouver, these next two systems could bring over 80 millimeters. So we've got a couple of wet ones in the forecast. The timing hasn't been great. We may end up with some breaks Friday afternoon. And Baneet, I'm really watching this forecast. It's all over the place. Low confidence in exactly what happens past Sunday, but there's a good chance it'll be cold and we could be talking snow.
So lots of variety coming up.
Yes,
hey?
I'll be busy.
Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
And that is your late news for Wednesday. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. For news anytime, visit our website, cbc.ca/BC. Your next local news is on the early edition on CBC Radio 1, and that starts tomorrow morning at 5 a.m. Good night.